Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Finn, or yet another gaming fail, and today we're here with another DCS tutorial. We're not doing the mission editor, we're not flying, instead we're going to be looking at your settings for VR. So, I just want to stress, I did not do all of the legwork for this video. A lot of it comes down to the work of RosyPlays on the DCS forums. They did a post on April 23rd of 2021, and this was kind of with the release of 2.7.4, there was some performance increases, decreases. There have been some better performance gains recently. There will hopefully be more, as there are going to be some DCS game engine changes coming up in the next year or beyond, as mentioned by Nick from Eagle Dynamics in the 2022 and beyond video that they released, which is honestly so good. I look forward to any performance increase we can get. But today we're going to run through. So, RosyPlays did some research, did some playing around with the settings, and reported some changes. I have also done this testing. I followed kind of a procedure where I set everything down to the absolute worst, and then basically turned off VSync and just looked at how my performance would change. I did some flying around, and then I came back and I changed everything. And it took a couple of hours of fooling around and seeing how I could get DCS to perform, and so I kind of agree pretty much entirely with the findings of RosyPlays. RosyPlays plays with a normal display. I am playing with VR, so hopefully this information will be useful to you guys. So let's kick it off. Textures. For both terrain textures and your normal textures, between low and high, you should only be seeing a couple of FPS difference. All it really changes is going to be your VRAM, so your graphics cards RAM usage. So your mileage may vary. For me, I keep it as high because it just looks a lot better. And also, if you're flying something like the Tomcat, you know, it's impossible enough to read all of the little labels anyway because they're also scratched. So keeping your textures higher will give you a better chance of actually being able to read them, which is good. Civilian traffic. I keep that to off anyway. Apparently, it only gives you kind of like 1 FPS tops between the maximum and the minimum, according to RosyPlays' post. I believe a few other people have reported that it does have a higher impact, so take that with a pinch of salt. I keep it off because when you're playing a mission and you've got a vehicle driving on a road and the civilian vehicles are literally driving straight through the vehicle that you've placed down, it's a bit immersion breaking, so I keep that off. When it comes to not civilian traffic, water, between low and high you can get a 20 FPS difference according to RosyPlays. I found it to be about the kind of between 15 and 20 mark. Again, I'm running quite high specs on my PC, which I'll cover at the end of the video. So I switch mine to low because I want that increase in performance. Again, it's down to you, but I think that there's not really much visible change until you're like literally flying over the water, really low down. So I don't think it's that important. Then it comes down to your visibility range. So between low and ultra, you've got about 5 or 6 FPS difference according to RosyPlays. I find that a little higher in VR, so you might reach about 10 frames a second difference between the top and the bottom. So all it really does is reduce the amount of buildings and objects that can be seen from far away without needing to zoom. So the higher it's set, the further you'll be able to see things from without having to zoom in. So I'd probably recommend keeping it on. If it's only a couple frames a second difference, then does it really matter? I mean, if you keep it at high kind of area, at high or ultra, then basically as far as your T-pod functions, you should be able to see. That's pretty much the rule of thumb. Next then, heat blur. Apparently no performance difference. I don't think that there's too much of a difference from what you can see in VR, but I keep it to off anyway, just in case there is, and that's just my personal experience. And frankly, I don't look at the external of the plane too much. and I tend to fly with Frenchie, who doesn't even touch afterburners, so really seeing much of a heat blur is a shock, because he basically only flies the Harrier. So I look forward to when the Eurofighter comes out, so that I can actually like fly at a decent speed and not have to throttle everything back. Anyway, moving on. Shadows. There's between off to high, there can be about 6 frames a second difference. It's not that much performance hit. Basically, it's just how detailed your aircraft shadows are. Everything else should be baked in, more or less. So your mileage may vary. I found that I had a slightly higher performance hit from shadows, so I keep my shadows to low. But you again, your mileage may vary for VR. Let's see next. So, RosyPlays does not cover it in the forum post. I will cover it here. For VR, your resolution does change your performance, because you're rendering 2 screens at once. If you were to render it, if you were to have one display that you're setting up for just playing on a screen, you just set it to the display resolution on that screen. That's what your output will be. Whereas in VR, if you change the resolution here, it basically, what it does is it crams more or less pixels into that space. So that is important to note. I don't currently have a figure for how much that affects it, but I noticed quite an increase in FPS by turning it down to 1920 by 1200, as opposed to having it on, what was it, basically like 1440p, like here, like 2560 by 1440. Again, your mileage may vary. Test that out. That's one setting where if you're playing with VR, basically just switch that around and change it, turn it up, turn it down, and you'll find a nice happy medium. Your aspect ratio and monitors, that's related to your resolution, so I'll leave that. Your resolution of cockpit displays. This is actually relating to your mirrors and also your small displays. So if you have a plan on turning your mirrors on, then I guess sure you might want to have it higher. Really, it doesn't make too much of a difference for VR. You kind of want it higher. So I keep it at 1024, but I don't do every frame. The main reason why is because it does create some lag, but also you want a higher resolution so that you can actually read those displays, right? You know, your MFDs. MSAA, anti-aliasing. This will always have a pretty big effect. So between off and 4 times, there's about a 15 FPS decrease. But I find run it on about 2, and you get a nice balance of not having too jagged edges, but also getting some not having too much of a hit of performance. So that's okay. Depth of field. It creates blurriness that's kind of realistic to how your eyes would focus on things. I turn it off because I like to be able to see everything, and my eyes are blurry enough as it is. But it does give you 20 to 40 FPS increase decrease across the board. Again, this is done from a kind of flat thing where we turn everything all the way off and then turn it up and see how much that affects it. So this may compound with other things. So you'll just have to find that out for yourself. So I keep depth of field off. Lens effects and motion blur have negligible impact on your frame rates. So I keep them down, but mainly motion blur is to stop me from being sick. And the lens effects, if you have it on, it will kind of blind you by the sun. So again, your mileage may vary. You may want it on, you may want it off. That's up to you. Clouds, low to ultra, not a massive difference. In fact, I found that in VR I got better performance with ultra, which is weird. The only thing that I can think that affects would be that it renders in ultra anyway, and then downscales it. So I run clouds in ultra, and actually you kind of need it, because otherwise they do end up with kind of jagged edges on the clouds, which kind of defeats the point of volumetric clouds. But you know what I'm on about. So super sampling anti-aliasing. That basically renders in a higher resolution and then downscales it. So turning it up will I mean, probably make it unplayable because it is rendering in like 4K and then downscaling it to 1080p on your headset. So you know, basically, I would turn if you wanted higher anti-aliasing, turn up your MSAA, not your SSAA, in this, because in DCS it does make that much of a difference. Um, SSLR, which is your light reflections, it's about 8 to 10 frames a second. I've found um, it it does look better because it gives you better reflections. I think SSLR gives you the reflections off the carrier deck if you've got a wet deck. So, you know, preference I'd say is good. Also, I think it gives you good cockpit reflections, which is nice. Um, SSAO, ambient occlusion. So that softens a lot of edges between two hard objects. So you can get about 10 to 15 frames a second. I found it to go up to 20 frames a second in VR, and frankly, uh, it kind of makes it doesn't make much of a difference, and the difference it does make tends to be to performance more than it does to how you perceive things in the game. So I just turn it off. Um, Clutter and grass, depending on where you are, if you end up in a field somewhere, it can cost you up to 30 FPS off the bat. So I just keep it off. Frankly, you once you're once you're above 7,000 feet, you're not going to notice it anyway, because over 7,000 feet, it doesn't affect your performance. And really, if you're in a low altitude dogfight where you are below 7,000 feet, if you're in a jet or whatever, you kind of want the extra frame rate over being able to see some grass. So, I basically have it turned off. You could turn it up a little bit. That'd probably be good. Forest visibility, basically it just changes the distance at which the trees render in. There's only about 5 to 10 frames a second to be gained there. So you can kind of turn it down. I have it turned all the way down at the moment because I don't do much low altitude flying, but I'd probably maybe turn it up to 50 to 70%. There's no real reason to have it on 100%. It does not make a big difference between 70 and 100%. So, gain a couple FPS there, but not major. Forest details factor and scenery details factor. It's just changing the details on things around you. I run it lower, but frankly, I think you can kind of get away with running it higher if you'd like. The preload radius, basically, if you're the major difference will be your load times. So it'll preload. It'll preload in a lot of the environment around you. If you have kind of about 16 gigabytes of RAM or less, you don't really want to go over 75,000. According to RosyPlays on the forum, as I say, post is down below. So, basically, if you start experiencing random crashes or longer load times, etc., you can turn this down. It won't affect your in-game flying really, but basically it's just a loading kind of thing. So the more you load, the less work your machine has to do. It's kind of like caching everything for you. But if you've got a fast hard drive, then you're good. So gamma, higher or lower, just changes how things look. It's just like a post-process effect added on. So yeah, you can see how things go. So gamma and brightness, that's fine. Anisotropic filtering. So basically that changes how well distant objects kind of come in with detail. 8 times is probably as much as you really need. It's 18 to 20 FPS difference. I saw more towards the higher end difference in VR. So probably change that maybe to 8 to 4 times, depending. But yeah, it's not it I don't think you gain a massive amount of quality between 8 and 16 times, and you save a lot of performance. Anything lower than that, you are sacrificing quality for performance. So obviously that is known. Um, so between the terrain object shadows, it's about 10 frames. I found it's not that high, but again, you'll see. It just really changes how the terrain shadows come out. Not that much of a an increase decrease. So keep that on probably flat is good for VR. You don't see much of a noticeable difference because it just uses the pre-baked textures. Um, Rain droplets, a couple FPS difference, and also if you're flying in the rain, it gives you a cool raindrop effect. So personally, I don't fly in the rain much, but when I do, I'd like it on. And obviously, it'll only affect your performance when you're in the rain. So, yeah, if you're not going to fly in the rain, it's not going to affect you that much. VSync. Now, obviously, VSync can cap your FPS. It can be good for you if you have problems with frame tearing. If you're noticing frame tearing in VR, you're actually better turning your settings up. And the reason why is because frame tearing often happens because your GPU is trying to push more frames to your screen than your screen can handle. So you can either turn on VSync to stop frame tearing, or you can turn your settings up, which may impact your FPS performance, but will get rid of a lot of the frame tearing. Full screen doesn't really affect much, and the cursor confined to game window does not change much at all. So then basically, that's kind of the main settings there. This is how I have my PC set up. The last thing that you want to change is your pixel density under the VR settings in the top right hand corner. I have mine on about 1.4. Basically, it just crams in as many more pixels as it can manage. This is normally done on the VR side. I run the Oculus Rift S, so basically just in the rendering of things, when it's passed to Oculus to do all the processing, it will try and get a few extra pixels in there. It's worth it for a little bit less jagged edges and a meager difference to performance. But yeah, so just to go through then, we've covered off everything in here. If there's nothing that you've understood, if there's something you haven't understood, you can drop us a message down in the comments, or you can go to the original post on the DCS forums, which I have put in the description. Just to cover off, if in case you find that your performance is any different, I have tested these findings and found them to be correct, and my specs are very different to the forum user who posted this. So the user in question, so they have a i5 7600K, which is a 4-core 4.5 gigahertz processor. They have 2400 megahertz, 16 gig of DDR4 RAM. Some SSDs, etc. For loading the game. They have an MSI GTX 1060 gig, 6 gig graphics card, and then they're running a 1080p display. So now, to contrast that, on my machine, I'm running a Ryzen 3900X, which is a 12-core, 24 threads, 4.2 gigahertz CPU, which is a big step up. I've got 32 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz Corsair Vengeance RAM, so and obviously that's DDR4, so that will also have an effect. I'm running an RTX 3080 Ti, which I installed the other week. If you want to see me installing it, you can check out my channel. It's currently my my highlighted video. And then I run everything off of SSDs. So I would say that shy of spending another $5,000 on my machine, I'm pretty much at the high end of what you would expect from kind of DCS users, and that they're probably about the mid to low end of what you would spend on a machine to get the most performance out of it. For DCS. So this is not a humble brag. This is saying that for me, I found the settings changes that they've recommended to be in line with what they've said, and they're running a vastly different computer to mine, your mileage may vary. Please take everything that I've said with a pinch of salt. Do play around with your settings. The only way that you're going to find your settings optimization is better is if you test out for your machine. You will not find that using the same settings as every other person out there, even if they had the exact same hardware specs, it might not be the same because of other factors on your machine. Take it from me, I've worked in IT for like the whole of my professional career. Every computer is different, and thus every way that you set up a computer needs to be different to make sure that it all runs nice and smoothly. But yeah, anyway, I've been Finn, or yet another gaming fail. I thank you guys very much for your time. I hope you all have a lovely day, and that you will catch me in the next video. I do hope. Obviously, if this has been useful, drop a comment, drop a like, maybe a subscribe if you're feeling generous. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.